Hey, welcome back, everyone. I want to talk today about some of what's happening with China and with Russia. Of course, some of you may have saw that Xi Jinping just got a third term in office. It's China, right? So it's a little different than maybe we think about a presidential election, but this is actually pretty significant. I'm going to be going into what is going on in China, what happened when Xi Jinping escorted out his main rival enemy on the Jiang faction, Hu Jintao. What also happened with with the nature of him getting a third term and what that means for the future, as the Chinese Communist Party also shows signs of really preparing for war right now. Also, folks, Russia is talking about nuclear war. They're suggesting now, and this is kind of the new stage of it, they're suggesting, claiming, even including making high-level phone calls, that Ukraine is planning to launch a false flag nuclear attack on its own soil using what they say is a dirty bomb. And, of course, a lot of people are taking that as being Russia basically spreading disinformation to kind of steer away the blame if it were to launch such an attack. This is kind of the nature, I think, of modern warfare. Modern warfare so does traditional warfare, but modern warfare very often has a ruse. You will do something to make people believe that maybe something did not happen, or maybe it was somebody else who did it. And then when it does happen, people are confused. It lessens the ideological blow when an incident does take place. And right now, a lot of this is really going around nuclear war. Remember, they were talking about using localized nuclear weapons? Well, this would be a perfect example of that if they were to do it. Folks, that said, those of you wondering where I'm at, I'm actually kind of on semi-vacation right now. I will be doing the shows, so don't worry, but taking a bit of relaxing time, a little more relaxing. I'm actually at my mom's house, so traveling right now. All right, folks. Also, those of you on YouTube or Rumble, we will jump over exclusively to Epic TV after about 25-ish minutes. So again, if you don't have an account yet, please join us there. I do an hour-and-a-half show. We do questions there. It's always a great conversation, and you also help keep this show going, because right now with YouTube, YouTube does not like me one bit. Let's put it that way. They randomly deleted the Crossroads Highlights channel. They censor us. It's just, there's no future on YouTube. I just do it because, you're all here, so I like doing the show for you all. Folks, that said, let's jump into the first story for the day. Let's talk about Russia, and it's threatening. Right now it's threatening to use a dirty bomb, while claiming Ukraine is threatening to use a dirty bomb. A lot of people think this is Russia clearing the way for its own use of such a weapon. Let me explain this. So this is Politico right here. I'll show you the first one. And it says, Russia defense chief makes unfounded claims of Kiev ready to use dirty bomb. It's Politico. They like to use this whole unfounded claim. It's become a boy who cried wolf type thing, where they claim everything is unfounded claim, even sometimes when it is a very well-founded claim. In this particular case, I wouldn't say it's totally unfounded. I would say there is some foundation to it. Zelensky himself was calling for, what do you call it? A preemptive counterattack on Russia in context of nuclear weapons, and so it's not unfounded at this point. Politico is making just politicized statements by saying that. But let me explain a bit further. It says Russia defense chief makes unfounded claims on Kiev ready to use dirty bomb. It says Russian defense minister Sergei Shoigu on Sunday had telephone calls with French, British, and Turkish counterparts in which he made unfounded claims that Ukraine might be prepared to use a dirty bomb, according to Russian readouts of the conversation. It says the conversations took place after Russian President Vladimir Putin recently raised the prospect of using nuclear weapons in the war he launched against Ukraine, and after Shoigu faced intensifying political pressure over a series of disorderly retreats in Ukraine. Now it says the calls came as Russia continues a mass evacuation of civilians from occupied Kherson and southern Ukraine. And defense analysts believe that the movement of people is setting the scene for Moscow to withdraw its troops from a significant part of the region. But Among EU diplomats, European Union diplomats, there are fears that Moscow is only setting the scene for things to get worse. And it's saying the Russian readout of the call with UK Defense Minister Ben Wallace talks only about the risk of a dirty bomb. It says, however, in none of those readouts does Moscow provide any evidence of its claims. Now, what is the evidence of the claims? Basically, both sides are threatening to some extent to use nuclear weapons. If you remember, there was the Chechen leader, working with Russia, of course, who was calling for Putin to use a localized, low-yield nuclear weapon in Ukraine. One of the reasons is they're losing the battles in a few key regions. Russia does not want to lose those battles. And of course, if Russia is in a state where they can't really... Russia cannot lose this war. Let's put it that way. They do not have the option to lose this war. This war is going to have long-term implications for the entire world. Whether it's oil and gas to Europe, whether it's international relations, whether it's Russia's trade with Western countries in general. This is going to have a very long-term impact on Russia. Russia, Vladimir Putin, even very likely will face war crime charges if, for example, he loses this war. His life depends on winning this war. So he cannot lose this war. His only hope, his best hope, would be to have some kind of peace talks. But of course, that would be very difficult because the West is actually trying to prevent that from happening. Meaning he cannot move out. He cannot fully retreat. And if you're losing a battle in a key area and you're forced to retreat, and it looks like you're going to lose maybe the war because of a key battle, and you're losing troops, what do you do? Well, they're talking about using low-yield nuclear weapons. The threats on the Russian side are very, very real right now. This is not just random talk. This is very real. These threats are very real. At the same time, given that Russia was threatening to use nuclear weapons on Ukraine, Zelensky in Ukraine is calling on the West to launch preemptive counterattacks. Now, that's a George Bush-era type slogan, preemptive counterattacks, meaning, well, it's not a counterattack if it's preemptive. It basically means you hit them before they can hit you. That's the idea. And he's arguing that if Russia is planning to use nuclear, or talking about using nuclear weapons in Ukraine, then the West should use nuclear weapons against Russia. Given that situation, that's where we are right now. And Putin is suggesting now that Ukraine may, again, launch a false flag attack on its own soil. They're removing citizens from this region already, meaning that the civilian casualties will be minimal. At the very least, the ones who do choose to remain will be the ones who chose to remain knowing the threats they were facing. And also, it appears that Putin is pulling out some of his own troops, suggesting that he's either anticipating an attack or he's planning an attack. Now, given that situation, why would Ukraine launch a false flag attack and basically launch a dirty bomb on its own soil? To be honest, when you're dealing with modern warfare, I wouldn't put anything beyond them, especially a country with corruption as significant as they have. It wouldn't be unheard of. Sorry about that, folks. I don't have my normal connection. Now, would Ukraine do this? It's possible. Let's just be honest with ourselves. It does appear the West was the people who destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline. All the evidence points to it. The narrative that Putin destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline is based solely on the idea that Putin technically would have the capabilities for it. There's no evidence suggesting they actually did it. All the evidence points to the West. Would they launch a similar attack if, for example, there were no civilian casualties? If, for example, even troop casualties were minimal because they could pull people out? And if, for example, it could win them the ideological war? Yes, practically they could. And they could also do it with a dirty bomb, which would have a minimal impact, a very localized impact. Meaning it would basically make that region unsettleable. You would lose the ability to deploy anybody to that region. People would not be able to live in that region for a good long while. You could do some big We Are the World cleanup campaign and do a whole big show about it. Strategically, it makes sense for them as well. I'm not saying either of them is going to do it. I'm not supporting either country over the other. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. And both countries may do it. If both countries may do it, you have a veil of plausible deniability under which either of them could do it. And so I would take these threats actually very seriously right now. Now, given that situation, the West is arguing that it's Russia planning to do this. The Guardian says this. They're saying West makes plans to avoid panic if Russia uses nuclear bomb in Ukraine. Now, the preparations they're making are not counterattacks. Under the Cold War, basically there was the policy of nuclear Armageddon. We're a country to use a nuclear weapon. In fact, the United States even threatened the Soviet Union if the Soviet Union was going to use nuclear weapons on China against the Chinese Communist Party, which they wanted to. And the U.S. basically told the Soviet Union at the time, which is, of course, led into modern-day Russia, told the Soviet Union at the time that the U.S. would still counter any kind of nuclear attack, even if it was against the Chinese Communist Party, suggesting how broad the no-use policy is and how broad the essential assured what they call the assured destruction policy. They no longer have that. They're no longer threatening that, meaning that if a country were to launch a nuclear attack right now, it would essentially be allowed to happen. There would be other types of repercussions, possibly even dragging in Western military forces. And right now you do have U.S. troops being deployed very close by. This could very easily turn into World War III, in other words. This would not be like a global nuclear war, but this would turn into very likely a type of World War III scenario. Now, The Guardian says this. They say, Western officials are engaged in prudent planning behind the scenes to prevent chaos and panic in their home countries in the event Russia was to detonate a nuclear bomb in or near Ukraine. And it says further, and towards the end of last month, Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, said there would be catastrophic consequences for Moscow if it sought to deploy a tactical nuclear weapon, which can have the power of 6 or 7 Hiroshima blasts. Very likely it wouldn't be that big, but they're saying hypothetically it could. The West does not want to spell out how it might respond to preserve a deliberate ambiguity, meaning they don't want to say exactly what the West would do because they want to keep Russia guessing. They might do nothing. They might act very strongly. But they say on Friday the official would not be drawn on what nuclear-armed countries might do. But the expectation is that to avoid rapid escalation, any initial response would be non-nuclear. So there you go. They would not retaliate with nuclear weapons if the attack were to take place. They're claiming they would retaliate in other ways. They're not saying how they would retaliate. How would they retaliate? Well, frankly, the West has been kind of toothless with this stuff. You can look at how the United States reacted even when the Chinese Communist Party took Hong Kong, ended democracy in Hong Kong. What would they do, for example, on this case? Well, they haven't shown their teeth. They haven't demonstrated any kind of strength or any kind of willingness to do much. And so Russia might take that as an opening to do something very drastic. Now, it says the French president said the country's fundamental interests wouldn't be directly affected at all, for example, if there was a ballistic nuclear attack in Ukraine in the region. So France is out. They wouldn't do anything, essentially. Earlier this week, Jeremy Fleming, the head of the GCHQ spy agency, said he had not seen any sign that Russia was preparing to use a tactical nuclear weapon in or around Ukraine. So GCHQ intelligence agency is suggesting that even the idea that Russia may use a nuclear weapon is disinformation. There's no evidence of it. So it's a groundless claim in the same way they're claiming Ukraine is a groundless claim. Now, they're saying it is his agency's job to help monitor Russian military movements and whether its military is trying to pair a nuclear warhead with a conventional missile. Experts generally believe that Putin is engaged in a bluff, trying to provoke fear and uncertainty in the West to ensure that the U.S. or NATO does not enter the war on Ukraine's side. In other words, they're arguing that Russia appears to be using this as a type of ruse to stop further escalation, ironically by threatening extreme escalation. Now, you decide what it is, folks. I won't go further on that. But I want to go deeper into what's happening now in China, because the Chinese Communist Party is talking about launching a full-scale war. And if you remember, we talked about previously, the Chinese Communist Party does have war plans that right now suggest they want to get the U.S. involved in 4 separate wars. Russia would be one war. Terrorism, they're saying, would be another war. You can look at what happened with the Taliban and the Taliban getting armed to its teeth again. Iran having some pretty serious localized conflicts, really a brewing revolution. And also the possibility the CCP could get someone else involved. But regardless of that, Xi Jinping has now won a 4th term in office. Xi Jinping he will soon have to demonstrate his strength. And that's gonna have to take some kind of form. The real concern now is that Xi Jinping, now having this 3rd term, which is unprecedented, will do something drastic, including possibly launch a war, and he is talking openly about it. The Chinese Communist Party is openly talking about this. Technically, if you go by their own doctrine, they say they're already in a war. All right, folks, that said, before we go further, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data or online activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. That's Secur. That can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. The Secure server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, mine your data, or upload your contacts. It functions by adding people you know, then adding the secure numbers, and of course you can send people invites. Now, folks, it's only $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can go to secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And folks, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, folks, that said, let's talk about what's happening with the Chinese Communist Party right now, because in some ways, the Chinese Communist Party could be a larger threat than Russia. Russia, you could say, is a localized threat. Russia is not technically a threat to the United States, unless you talk about unconventional war. My mom's cup. Unless you talk about unconventional war, they're talking about in terms of their actual military doctrine and what they want to accomplish. They want to control the Eurasian region, but not much of a threat beyond their own borders. The issue with Russia when it comes to the United States is that we could get pulled into a war with them to defend U.S. allies in the region, or to try to deter escalation or something else like that. The U.S. could get pulled into a broader war with Russia, and when it comes to Russia, that's basically the extent of risk with them. With the Chinese Communist Party, it's different. The Chinese Communist Party is talking about actual invasion of U.S. soil. The Chinese Communist Party is talking about really aggressive war plans, including previously even the use of nuclear weapons against the United States, including the use of biological weapons against the United States, including, for example, their development of biological weapons that can target specific DNA strands. They've talked before about getting the lower 48 states, meaning that they want to wipe out the U.S. population and gain control of U.S. soil. Their war plans and their discussion on it is extremely aggressive. What the Chinese Communist Party is talking about is beyond anything that I think even we've heard since maybe Alexander the Great, talking about conquering cities and burning them to the ground and salting the ashes. The CCP's level of rhetoric is beyond anything And it's shocking that more people don't mention this, because I assume they do it out of financial interest because they make a lot of money in China. They don't want to call out the CCP. The CCP is more aggressive than Russia. They're more belligerent. They're making stronger threats. And now they actually might move on some of these. Folks, let me show you first off The Guardian. It says, China's leader Xi Jinping secures third term and stacks inner circle with loyalists. There's a bit more nuance to this than what a lot of the legacy and corporate media are saying. The idea that he's stacking his inner circle with loyalists. It's a little more complicated than that, folks. But let me explain to you what's going on with this. Now it says, Xi Jinping has been confirmed as leader of China for a precedent-breaking third term after a week-long political meeting eliminated key rivals and strengthened his political power. The 20th Party Congress, the most important meeting of the ruling Chinese Communist Party 5-year political cycle, saw about 2,400 delegates gather in Beijing to rubber stamp major reshuffles and constitutional changes before its official close on Saturday. At a press event on Sunday, 7 key Xi loyalists were revealed as members of China's most powerful political body, the Politburo Standing Committee, as they walked on stage in order of rank. Now, there were some big things people noted that took place. One of the big things that happened, for example, was that Hu Jintao was escorted out of the building. Hu Jintao was the former Chinese Communist Party leader just prior to Xi Jinping. If you go by the leadership, there was Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi Jinping. Deng Xiaoping did the whole opening up to the West, the idea of economic reform in China, while at the same time using the slogan of hide your strength and bide your time. The saying he used was that black cat, brown cat, or something like that, if it catches mice, what does it matter? In other words, the goal of the CCP to defeat the United States eventually was always in place, even though Deng Xiaoping put on a cowboy hat and tried putting on a big show like he was opening up China to the West and like he was a big friend of Western countries. A lot of Americans, unfortunately, were eating out of his hand, while he maintained a lot of the Maoist policies that they want to destroy the United States. And Deng Xiaoping, behind the scenes, and including in Chinese writing at the time, wasn't hiding it very well, but did make it very clear that was the intention. After Deng Xiaoping, of course, Jiang Zemin came into power. He rose through the ranks, actually through the Tiananmen Square massacre. Jiang Zemin also started the persecution of Falun Gong and started a pseudo kind of pay-to-play system of getting into power within the CCP, where you had to get blood on your hands. You had to commit atrocities if you wanted to rise through the ranks. After Jiang Zemin was Hu Jintao, and Hu Jintao was always a puppet. Hu Jintao never had full power within the Chinese Communist Party. It was basically seen that Jiang Zemin was still pulling the strings. Jiang Zemin still maintained power behind the scenes, even during Hu Jintao's reign. After Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping stepped in, and Xi Jinping was kind of considered an outlier. He's not really well educated. He comes from the country. He was kind of seen as just a temporary hold. Then, of course, he didn't play Jiang Zemin's games. He did not go along with the Jiang plan, which started a very strong faction battle. That faction battle on the Xi Jinping side took the form of things like, for example, the anti-corruption campaign, where Xi Jinping was going after members of the Jiang faction, arresting them, accusing them of embezzlement or fraud or whatever else. Look, I'll let you on a secret. Almost every Chinese official is involved in embezzlement or fraud. So they could use that excuse to go after anybody. And of course, the way that Jiang Zemin set up the power structures in China, you would rise to the ranks by getting engaged in human rights abuses and stuff like that. So every one of them could be purged. Every single one of them. Now, the Jiang faction was trying to assassinate Xi Jinping multiple times. Xi Jinping did not get assassinated. And Xi Jinping, in this latest move, really kind of moved the final chess pieces, it looks like. and pushed out the Jiang faction. This was a serious, what you witnessed just now, him having members of the Jiang faction escorted out, was a really, really telling sign that Xi Jinping is done with their faction, that they're out, and you're going to have now a more consolidated, more focused Chinese Communist Party. Given that, it should be noted that even inside China, the power structures are not just government. The power structures are not just CCP leadership. The power structures are military, they're intelligence, they're people's armed police, they're even businesses. In fact, some of the major real estate holdings are under the Jiang faction. A lot of people believe that's why Xi Jinping has taken moves to destroy parts of the Chinese economy. I'm not saying this is the case, but I know there are people who say this. Maybe it's true, but maybe it's not. A lot of people are saying that one of the reasons Xi Jinping has gutted certain parts of the real estate industry, for example, is because a lot of that was under the Jiang faction. A lot of the surface stuff you're watching is not really about what's happening on the surface. A lot of it's about what's happening beneath the surface, and the surface stuff is just a phenomenon that you're witnessing that's showing the effects of what's happening behind the scenes. Now, given this, what does this mean? A lot of people talk about Xi Jinping as a dictator, and Xi Jinping as being, the walking the steps of Mao Zedong, and Xi Jinping basically changing the status quo in China. And you have a lot of people saying that he needs to step down and so on. Folks, it won't make a difference. The Chinese Communist Party is still the Chinese Communist Party, no matter who's there. And none of them are good. You could have anybody at the head of the CCP. You can maybe like Winnie the Pooh. You can have anybody there, and it's going to be the CCP regardless. The Chinese Communist Party does not function like some Western country. The Chinese Communist Party has very clear agendas, a very clear ideology, and the nature of it is not going to change no matter who is there. And so a lot of the people just focusing on Xi and saying he's the problem, yeah, that's partly true. But look, the CCP is going to be the CCP even if he's gone. The CCP is going to be the CCP no matter who steps in to take his place. The problem is not just Xi. The problem is the Chinese Communist Party. The real big thing with what's happening now, though, is you're going to have a more focused Chinese Communist Party. You're going to have a Chinese Communist Party that may be dealing a little less with internal fighting and can focus a lot more on external fighting. And that's the big concern with what just took place. All right, folks, I'm going to go deeper into this because right now, basically, what I just said is kind of the analysis going around. Sorry about that, folks. Anyways, the analysis going around right now is that the Chinese Communist Party may move to take Taiwan very soon. On an accelerated timeline is what Blinken is saying. And I want to go deeper into this, folks. For that, though, let's jump over to Epic TV exclusively. I'll go into this. We'll talk about it. And also talk about how the CCP is preparing for war. They have a strategic opening right now. The U.S. military is weakened. We've basically dissolved a lot of our strategic oil reserves. We're divided domestically and we're divided politically. We've used a lot of our weapons, given them to Ukraine. We've depleted a lot of our arsenals. Our military can't recruit enough people. Things are not looking hot for us. And we're heavily right now we're so focused on Russia, even as a proxy war, that we're losing a lot of our key resources that we would need to launch a real war. If the Chinese Communist Party were to do something very drastic right now, it would be kind of easy for them to do it, especially if Russia were in fact to use a low-yield nuclear weapon, or even if Ukraine were to use a low-yield nuclear weapon. If that were to happen, the entire West would be focused on that. And if China did something very drastic at that time, like, for example, try to invade Taiwan, that would be a strategic opening that would have not nearly as much repercussion. That's where we are right now. That said, folks, let's jump over exclusively to Epic TV for the rest of this. And folks, before we jump over, let me show you a quick trailer real quick. Right now, as I mentioned, we did an interview with Alex Newman about Obama holdovers. You remember that we were talking about how the Chinese Communist Party set up police operations in the United States. According to Alex Newman, a lot of that was able to take place, including Operation Fox Hunt, because of Obama holdovers who were basically trying to, block any action to stop these things. There are some updates with this right now, which is it does appear that there's been some arrests of Chinese agents in the United States. But according to Alex Newman, the reason this was not done sooner is because of these individuals who were maybe ideologically interested in protecting these operations. Folks, let me show you that trailer, then we'll jump exclusively over to Epic TV.
The holdovers from the Obama administration were cheerleaders for Communist China, cheerleaders for the CCP's growing role in international affairs.
Under the Obama administration, the Chinese Communist Party had Operation Fox Hunt, where they were deploying agents on American soil to arrest Chinese dissidents and people they said were guilty of corruption and things like that.
During the Trump administration, they were actually battling in a hardcore way with these Obama holdovers who were insisting that Communist China was great, that we should encourage their penetration of these international institutions, the UN, the Interpol, and so on. And now with the Biden administration in power, the very same people are back in very senior posts at the State Department. And so I think what we're dealing with here is not just naivete. What we're dealing with here is a situation where officials of the U.S. government are deliberately not doing their job. They're deliberately failing to enforce U.S. laws.
Folks, again, that's on Epic TV exclusively, and that's let's jump over exclusively to Epic TV. So, folks, I will see you there. Let's jump over now. All right. Thank you for being